Welcome to Ask SME Anything. Your chance to ask the ITProTV subject matter experts questions live. Here's your host, Don Pizzette.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Ask SME Anything, the show brought to you by ITProTV, where you, the viewer, get to ask our subject matter experts your questions related to anything. Life, love, mystery, you name it, we tackle it.
That's right.
But mostly IT and certification topics, kind of what we stand into. And here in the studio with me today is Mr. Daniel Lowry. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
And, just to set some boundaries before this turns into an episode of Loveline here. In the tech world, we know you have many expertise, such as stealth,
skills.
assassination, lockpicking. But in the tech world, what would you say your areas of expertise happen to be?
Areas of expertise would be systems and network administration and security as well, trying to keep things tight and locked away, confidential, integrity, availability, all that other goodness. That's what I dabble in.
Yeah, I asked Daniel for a security policy once, and he showed me this one-liner that he had. It said, 2 men can keep a secret if one is dead. So, effective policy writing, that's a skill of his. But we do have a number of questions. They're not just security-related, but several different areas. I always look forward to these, Daniel, because the security questions are usually the fun ones.
We do have a bit of fun with them.
You get to do you answer the question at the same time you get to find out, is this person trying to do something illegal or legal? Like, did we? So, all right. Well, if you have a question that's inside of one of Daniel's expertise areas, please feel free to ask them by using Twitter. Post on Twitter and use hashtag AskSMeAnything. Our social media team is watching that and feeding those questions over to me live during the show. But we also gather those questions throughout the week. So if you want to post a question, or hey, maybe you have a question that's not in Daniel's area of expertise, like I don't know, saying please, things like that. If you have questions about saying please, just throw them out there, and we'll gather those and we'll use them when we have the other SMEs. Yeah, that's right. Fashion, whatever. Yeah. But
I don't know anything about that.
Databases, development, Adobe Creative Products, that kind of stuff. We have SMEs for each of those. We'll drag those questions into those shows and get them answered. We want everybody to get answered, and let me use this as a quick spot to remind everybody: if you want to make sure your question gets answered on the show, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to ITPro.TV. If you sign up on our website, you can post in our Q&A forums, our question answer forums. We prioritize those questions to make sure they get answered on the show. And then after that, we tackle the whole rest of the world's problems.
I've been sending people to my PayPal account to make sure they get
a good bribe or two is a great way to move right up the ladder.
Grease the wheels, right?
All right. Well, this week, we actually have a handful of questions that I think are pretty neat. I was somewhat surprised. Most of the questions are like 5 words or less, but they're really, really cool questions.
Straight to the point, right?
So, so I'm kind of excited.
We don't need no jibber jabber.
That's right. Apply the Mr. T school of thinking to technology. Maybe the T stands for technology. Mr. Tech. Who knew all this time? All right. Well, let's jump into our first question coming at us from the Twitter sphere. And this one is a four-worder, right? What is an APT? Not to be confused with a PYT. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. What is an APT, Daniel?
That's a great question. One that is seemingly very difficult for people to answer from time to time. And I think that's because of the nature of what an APT is. And while, yes, most people do get it confused with a PYT, we want to stop that here and now, that it is not a PYT. It is an APT, which stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. Now, I'm sure that just answered everyone's question. We can go on to the next one.
Done.
That was great, right? But let's break that down. What exactly is going on when we say advanced persistent threat? So advanced meaning it's highly technical. It is not your average, everyday, run-of-the-mill type of threat against your network or your environment, right? Persistent means it gets to hang around regardless of what you might do to try to stop it, putting in security controls that would definitely hinder an average everyday threat. These APTs get to hang out even though you've done just about everything you can to stop them. And then T is the threat, right? That this is a threat. So advanced persistent threat, this is typically a bad actor or a group of bad actors. Almost invariably it's a group that have that are highly skilled at what they do, right? They are known to use zero-day type exploitation, so custom code, secret sauce that only they know or that is known to a very few amount of people, and they use that to find multiple instances or inroads into an environment or a network, a system, whatever the target is. Typically very targeted, that they choose targets based on ideas of ideology, political, socio, whatever, and they choose these targets for those said reasons, attack them using this very advanced malware. Once they get in, or threats, vulnerabilities that they know to exist using their advanced set of skills. Once they get in, they then pivot to the network where they install malware, which then does all the dirty work for them, typically. This is a very generalized explanation. So the malware they'll install, which is custom, typically not picked up by your things like antivirus, anti-malware systems. They don't see it because they're not known as a signature, or even their heuristics are so weird or obfuscated that they're not able to pick up on it and find out, oh, you have a problem. And then they look out from around the rest of the network looking for other inroads, other machines which they can compromise. At that point, they would then use those pieces of malware to exfiltrate data or deface websites, cause denial of services, whatever. Typically, they also go for big targets, large corporations, ICS, critical infrastructure. They like to target these types of things because, well, they've got the skills to do it. And if they're hired to do it, then, they're going to make the big bucks doing that. But there you go.
I can see where some of the confusion is going to come in, though, because like you were saying, it's usually these bad actors. Mm-hmm. And for me, I immediately wonder, like, why would Nicolas Cage or Kirsten Dunst want to attack my network? It doesn't make any sense. But
who knew they had such hacking skills, too?
I mean, really, really talented.
They could stop acting.
Except for acting, yeah. So the thing to remember here with APTs, and you described it really well, it's not a single threat, right? It's usually more than one attack vector, and it's maybe malware combined with phishing or spear phishing, and all of this together, and maybe even individual pieces that look innocuous that when all put together are forming this threat, which makes it super difficult to detect. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is totally correct. The idea, plus the idea that the vulnerabilities that they are exploiting are typically not known. We don't know they exist. This is zero-day stuff. When I say complex, highly skilled people, they are writing their own exploit code. They are infiltrating using very sophisticated means and methods. So they're, like I said, not your script kiddies out there looking for that low-hanging fruit. Not even a lot of the times more skilled people that do like penetration testing, red teaming, but whatever. Those guys, as skilled as they would be, they might not even fall under these where they're writing their own exploits. So it would be that cream of the crop, the 10% of the top 10% kind of idea. So there are groups. You can actually go to FireEye. If you want to learn a little more about that, FireEye actually does a really good job. And we can do that. Let's pop on a web browser really quick because they got a cool page. And we can just Google search it or DuckDuckGo it as I stay anonymous on the interwebs there. Come on, machine. You can do it. There we go. So if you do FireEye, I think that's how they do it, APT, they'll have a lot of APT stuff going on here. I think it's either this one or the other one we saw. Let's get a map here. No, it's not the map. That's not what I want. Where's it at? I think it's under annual reports. But they have, you can look at these reports and see what groups they're looking at. Let's look at 2017. It's going to be a PDF. There we go. And they'll kind of explain what these groups are up to, who they're targeting, where they're out of. And you can see FireEye does a really good job of this stuff. It's very cool stuff. Of course, it's going to make me skim through a bunch of stuff, but you can go check these reports out, skim through them, take a look at the different actors out there. A lot of them coming from China and Russia, as you would probably expect. You also have a few of them out of North Korea as well. And you get to see where they're targeting. You'll see the very instances in which they're using some of the known stuff that they've done in the past that we now have patches for, so you can read CVE data on the exploits and vulnerabilities that they've perpetrated over the years. And very interesting stuff. I would highly recommend checking out that kind of stuff just for if you're interested in what APT is. If you do have a network and or an organization that wants to stay clear of this stuff, you probably just want to take if you're big enough. They're not typically not going to target smaller organizations. But if you're a large enough company, you need to take the stance of, we have been compromised. Let's look for it and mitigate when we find it.
Yeah, and a lot of times the detection, because this is a 0-day type thing, is we're not necessarily seeing them when they get in. We see them when they're exfiltrating data, when data is leaving the network, and so that's what we always want to keep an eye out for. It's all part of our threat response. And APT was a bit of a buzzword. Really, the last 2 years running at RSA, everybody talking about APT this, APT that. Now it's all machine learning and AI, so we hear a little bit less about it. Now it's just kind of run of the mill. APT, that's pretty much our normal.
Now it's going to be APT using machine learning and AI.
Ooh, wow, I didn't
right?
think of that.
Now
Yeah.
we've got ourselves a buzz phrase.
Skynet.
We have to name that before it becomes something, so that we can say we coined the phrase.
Oh man, we'll come up with something.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
Something annoying. I just got Nicolas Caged. There we go. All right. Yeah.
I love that.
All
we
right,
got Click
let's,
Jackman.
Before we start quoting Wicker Man, let's move on to our next question. So another question coming at us via the Twitter hashtag Asks Me Anything. What is the difference between a bug bounty program and penetration testing?
Ooh.
So it's a good question here. Daniel, what is the difference?
Oh, I was hoping you knew. No, no, it seems like they're the same thing on the surface, right? That you're looking for vulnerabilities, you're doing an assessment of some sorts, and providing that information to the owner of the system that you tested. But there is some very good indicators of demarcation that say, lines of demarcation that say, this would be a bug bounty and this would be a penetration test. One is the fact that, probably the biggest one, is that bug bounties are open to the community at large, whereas a penetration test is performed by penetration testers. They work for a company. This is what they do. They are an organization. They provide reports. They're very formalized in their setting. So that's probably the biggest difference between the two. One is open to the general hacker community that wants to come in, ethical hacker community. I mean, I guess it's open to bad hackers as well. But basically I'm saying, hey, good hackers out there, let me give you a scope of machines I want you to test. Go out there. If you find a bug, if you find a problem, an issue, a vulnerability, you're able to exploit it, let me know about it, and I'll pay you some money, or I'll give you some swag, or whatever the agreed upon, rewards are for participating in that bug bounty. Whereas a penetration test, I hire a company, they come in, it might be 2, 3, maybe 4 hackers. Typically, though, it's just a team of a couple of people. They come in, they're scoped out, they give you a statement of work. It's much more formalized. And when it's done, they hand in a report that's formalized. It says, here's what we found, here's what we were able to do. And then you as a company go off and you try to fix those areas of compromise or vulnerabilities. And then if you want to retest, you're going to have to pay extra money and have the testers come back. So one is somebody, I pay these hackers to come in, ethical hackers, to come in, find the vulnerabilities. Whereas here, I'm just opening up my system and saying, if you find something and it's worth my time and effort, it actually is a compromise. Based on the severity, I'll give you X amount of dollars or things.
So is there an advantage to one over the other? Like with I guess with a bug bounty, we have the potential to get more than one set of eyes on the problem. So, maybe they could turn up different things, but they're not necessarily professionals. So maybe it's not the best sets of eyes. Like, would we want to do both, or is one better than another?
Yeah. Really, I would say that as far as better than another, I would say that it depends on what it is that you want to do. Each of them have their pros and cons. And I remember reading an article and they likened it unto ninjas versus pirates, right? The age-old debate. Which ones, who would win in a fight, ninjas versus pirates? And really, they both have their own set of pros and cons, their strengths and weaknesses. Whereas in a penetration test, you have highly skilled people that do this every day for a living. They come in, you point them at a target, and they're great at this, right? They find that all the areas within a 2-week span or a week span, however long the typical pen test is, I think it's typically about 2 weeks. They find all this stuff, they submit your report, and they hand in, here's all the stuff that we did, right? Whereas in a bug bounty, you have, these guys are more like ninjas. I guess they're stealthy. They're kind of coming in on the slide. They have very esoteric skill sets from a variety of different types of people. So you get more people, so you're aggregating the idea instead of just a few. But that, like Don said, they might not be as skilled at everything as they are at maybe just specific things. Now, they try to address this in bug bounties by having private programs. So when you go in somewhere like Bug Crowd or HackerOne, and you become a researcher, you become a or a tester, and you want to participate in a program. Well, you have to kind of have some street cred, right? Because otherwise, who are you? Now, this is both plays into the advantage and disadvantage of the bug bounty, which is I might be a great pen tester. Maybe I'm doing pen testing for a living. I've decided to moonlight as a bug bounty hunter, right? But who knows that about me? How would they know? How could I prove that to them? Well, I've got to go after lower hanging fruit, go after bounties that aren't as enticing as some of the more, the private programs would be. I'm going to make more money on those private programs. And all the ones that are open to everyone that have the kind of payouts that I'll be looking for, probably going to spend a lot of time and effort for stuff. I'm going to have a lot of duplicates, things of that nature. I'm not going to get paid for that. So it's hard for them to bring in those guys without the people that have the real broad and deep skill set as bug bounty hunters to get into those private programs. You kind of have to prove your worth first, even though you've kind of done that with your job. So that can be, again, a pro and a con when it comes to bug bounty. Whereas with your pen test, you've got certifications, you've been in the business, you've got a resume, you turn that in, that proves who you are, you work at a job, and they vouch for you as a company. They're paying a lot of money for you to come in. So you get to do that. Like I said, pros and cons definitely within those systems, but once you've built up some reputation inside of bug bounty, you stand to make quite a bit of money. So interesting stuff there. And that does bring over the skill set that's necessary.
Speaking of skill sets, I do want to just double back real quick and point out that ninjas would absolutely beat pirates any day of the week. Like, it's not even really a question.
Unless the ship just pulled up to their camp and started firing cannons at them, then they'd all die.
It's just a cannon, you know? Anybody dodge a cannon? Come on.
Anybody can dodge a cannon.
All right, so let us move on to our next one. We got a question. This one not coming from the Twitter sphere, but instead coming from the ITProTV Q&A forums.
Okay.
Interesting question because I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Which is... this is Kevin on the ITProTV forum saying, are you going to come out with any training or labs for Pen Test Plus, which is a new certification from CompTIA? Daniel, thoughts on Pen Test Plus?
We thought about it, and yes, we are. We're very much going to do that. When I have free time, I've been working on little bits and pieces. And
we haven't started filming that
We
yet,
haven't
right?
started filming it, and I'm in very preliminary stages of building up any kind of show content for that because I've just got a couple other things on the front burner, and that's on the back burner right now. But as soon as I can get, it won't be long before we start filming that. Though.
What are we thinking, like Q3?
Might even be sooner.
Okay.
I got to get with Angie on exact dates on that, just because I got to get time to get a couple other shows done, or I just one show before we start. But we are definitely starting Pen Test Plus very, very soon. So Q3, I think, is very
safe
bet to say where we start.
And labs will be later. Labs are always a little bit trickier, but the show is definitely getting done soon. So Pen Test Plus will be coming to you from ITProTV.
And it'll be fun.
Yeah,
I'm going to make it as fun as I possibly can. We're going to... because you know me, I like doing stuff. I know you out there, you like doing stuff. All that stuff that you do, and it says, oh, let's look at a framework. Yeah, that's not fun.
Let's go over the OSI model again.
Oh, man, if we haven't done that sometime this century, we should probably do it.
Or what's your favorite risk analysis?
Oh, shut your mouth. Goodness gracious. Yeah. If I got to look at one more racy chart, I'm going to open a vein.
All right, so that's an easy one. Kevin, thank you for asking. Pen Test Plus is coming in. And for all of you guys out there, if you ever see or don't see a course that you're interested in learning about, please let us know. We take feedback from the viewers to figure out which courses we film. So that's a great way for us to find out what to add on our schedule. All right, our next question coming down the line here. Let's see. We got a couple of questions all at once. Let's go. Here we go. I got one coming in from Twitter, which is... Can you explain command injection?
Yes.
Oh, that's a big topic right there. In 10 minutes or less, Daniel, can you explain command injection?
Super easy. You inject a command into a system and tell it to run it. Yeah, see? I told you. Nothing to it. We probably want to know a little more detail about how that actually works. It's just a really interesting thing. Every now and then you come across a system that allows you to run commands from the system itself. This might be through a web application. It might be through a client application of some sorts. You never know where you find these things. But basically the idea is is that it's using system commands found on the system that it runs on, whatever server it's you're reaching out to, and saying, hey, not only run this command, but while you're at it, do me the favor, run this command too. And now that might be a little abstract, so I knew this question was coming, so I was able to whip up a quick web page that will utilize the ping utility for us and ping's websites. And this is something you might see out there in the wild as a utility, maybe on a dashboard somewhere, things of that nature. So let's jump into my machine. Let me bring up my browser. Let me open my page here. Actually, I need to start Apache, so I will do sudo service Apache to start. Get that going. There we go. Looks like we're good. Didn't get any errors. Fire that down. And let me go to my / and I called it comxphp. Here we go. So a very basic, once Justin came over and found all the invisible semicolons, it started working a whole lot better. So I gotta thank him for that. But just a simple utility, got a form field and a submit button. You put in an IP address like, I don't know, 127.0.0.1. You hit submits. Once it runs, and look at that. There was the ping command. It told me that it was able to reach that machine, gave me the statistics there. It's not pretty because this was really quickly whipped up, but you probably saw this as I was typing it in. If I throw another command at it, like cat Etsy password, now you'll notice that this little semicolon is here. And that's one of the ways in which you can do this command injection, command execution kind of vulnerability if you find it, is especially in Linux systems, there are a few ways in which you can run multiple commands strung together. Using a semicolon is one of them. So I'm basically, I'm taking advantage of the way the system works to give me the kind of output I want to see. So now if I run this command, I've strung multiple commands together. I didn't put any kind of boundaries on what was allowed inside of this box here. So it just takes whatever input I give it. Now I run it, and here in a second, now I'm seeing the output of not only the ping command, but of cat Etsy password. So this is the danger behind these things. And depending on what I'm running this service as, I'll have the ability to look at a multitude of different files and maybe even, you never know, start uploading files and working with things of that nature. So it's a really dangerous thing for you to find a command injection vulnerability, but this is the basics of how it works. I'm able to string things together. Now, filters are usually used to keep these things from happening. And there's, like I said, a couple of different special characters. We could do, let's do this. Let's play around with it. If I put this in here, I take out that, you've probably seen something like this before, right? And. So do this command and this command. So it's a logical and operator, a Boolean and. I hit submit, hopefully it'll work. But you can test with these different operators, and you see I get the same output. It ran both commands. I can also do a simple and, which would push the ping into the background and only give me the output to the thing, right? So there's a few different operators in which you can look up. So look up something like command injection cheat sheets, and you'll see these things, and you'll see if you were trying to create like a regex filter, what you would want to filter out.
Yeah, and it's sad because it's so easy for a developer to prevent this type of attack if they just do what's called input validation.
Right.
Anytime you have a form field in an application, you have to plan on people putting incorrect stuff in there. This form field is expecting an IP address, so it should only be accepting characters 0 through 9 and periods. Mm-hmm. It should accept any other character, semicolon, pound symbols, anything. So as far as like writing a regex filter, it's really easy if you understand the type of data that's supposed to go in that form. If you don't do input validation, there's a ton of ways to escape out of what an application is doing, and it's going to run in the background under the credentials of who knows what. And in this case, like with this scenario here, I mean, you could call the whoami command to see what those credentials were, or you call hostname and, all these different commands.
Start really enumerating the system. It's a great way to enumerate the system, what services are running, whatever you have access to. And like Don said, if I run whoami and it's, God forbid, running as root or some elevated privileged account,
then you really have
you're really in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. So, attackers, they'll use this to explore, and then they look at how can I get into the system, and then how can I stay in the system. Yeah. And if it's running as root, then it's not hard for them to do any of that. So that's basically command injection in a nutshell. You showed it here with, is this just standard HTML or PHP?
It's PHP, isn't it? Yeah.
But really any programming language.
Correct.
And SQL injection, very similar, right? You're injecting a SQL command instead of
That's
a
exactly
regular
right.
command. Same concept, though. These types of attacks shouldn't be possible if your developers are taking their time and doing proper input validation. But that's not how developers think, right? they think, I've got to get this feature done by my deadline.
In their defense, somebody comes by and says, "Done is better than perfect." Push it out.
Yeah, we've all heard that here.
We have heard that here.
Certainly. And then you end up regretting that down the road.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You start a bug bounty program so that look for that.
Hopefully you find it before the attackers do.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to our next question. Oh my goodness, this one is this is a biggie. So, hey Daniel,
Yeah.
why are IoT devices such a security concern?
Oh man, because they bad.
I would argue that it's not the IoT devices that are bad.
Agreed.
It's the developers behind them.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
gonna
I mean,
developer bash today.
depending on the IoT device, it could be that the IoT. I mean, some manufacturers go for cost, lower the cost, so it lowers the cost for the consumer. Right? They're going for quantity over quality, and because of that, they might use chips that have known vulnerabilities and open source code and that kind of stuff. So that's the problem here. So let's make sure we set the stage. We're all talking about what we're talking about, which is IoT, Internet of Things. It's these devices that pop up everywhere where we make everything internet connected. So your refrigerator is now connected to the network, and you can log in and say, "Oh, I didn't think my orange juice was cold enough this morning. Let me lower the temperature using my smartphone." Or I've got a Fitbit on, or I've got an Alexa sitting over on my table, or one of Google's personal assistants. Well, I forget what they're called.
Google Home.
Yeah, Google Home. There you go. And all these things are everywhere. We've got internet capable IP cameras everywhere. And what happens is that these devices, while very convenient and we love them and they're popping up everywhere, they are kind of rushed to market to hit that gold rush of, well, everybody needs something new that's connected to the internet. What can I slap a network device in and have it connect? And how quickly can I get that to market? Now, because of that, and like we were talking just a second ago about how somebody comes by and says, "Done's better than perfect, get it out. I need to make that money." Well, they don't do their proper SDLC, right? They don't do their proper validation. They don't test the thing. They don't look for security vulnerabilities before it hits market. They just hit the market, make the money, and then they leave it up to the consumer to do that work for themselves. And you can make the argument whether or not that's a good or bad practice, whatever. That's fine. When you buy a device, typically, if it is internet connected, it's running some sort of web service or some sort of inroad so that you can log into it and configure the device, right? Otherwise, it doesn't do you much good, right? So how do I do that? Well, you open the box up, you pop the device out, and it's got hey, here's a quick start sheet. Log into IP address such and such, and here's the default username and credential, the default credentials that go with these things. Great, you log in. You make sure you can attach to, oh, look, I've got the app on my phone, and it's working great. I love it. Amazing. And you walk away and you think, I've said it. Now I can forget it. Wonderful. But you didn't do any kind of security validation of this thing. You left the default credentials sitting around. Maybe there's no credentials at all. Maybe you can just log in. They're hardwired into it. This is not good for us. So this is why IoT has become a real security concern, because they're everywhere. And when I say everywhere, you can have one in your office, and that is connected to your office network, depending on who you are. Maybe you're Sony, right? Maybe you're another big company. Think of a hospital. You've got an IoT device watching patients. Is it secured? Is it locked down? You bought it off Amazon. I'm sure it's amazing. It was only $40. And I get to watch my patients from a dashboard. Really cool.
So while Daniel was answering that, I just went and rooted through my cabinet behind me here.
What you got there, Don?
Whenever we talk about IoT, I love to break this guy out right here.
Yep.
So this is a FOSCam web camera, right?
Yep.
It's got night vision. It has built-in wireless. It has an Ethernet jack, so you get wireless or wired operation, which is really nice. Got an SD card slot for recording. I mean, this is a great
You can
camera.
even, through the app, use voice, and it has a speaker built into it. I can speak through it.
Another feature this has is a root level remote execution vulnerability on it that FOSCam has refused to patch.
And why would they?
That they're not patching. So
Yeah.
they've released a number of firmware updates out for this, and then they finally said, you know what, we're not going to patch this one, which means it's a really
End of life,
big.
yeah.
Well, they haven't. They
Are they still selling it?
Oh,
Oh
you
my
can go buy this
goodness.
camera right now.
Nice.
The problem is whatever the flaw is must be so like deep in their
That
system
they would have to
have
redesign it completely.
They would, but they don't want to do that. And
Yeah,
so
'cause that
here's
costs
this
them
camera
money.
that you can still buy today that is sitting in my cabinet unplugged because I'm not going to plug the damn thing in, right?
Yeah,
And somebody could walk right into it. The big vulnerability with this camera is that if I have something private on my network, nobody can get to it. But these cameras, when you plug them in, they phone home to FOSCAM so that you can fire up your app and connect to them, right, to be convenient.
Yeah, it uses like
Well,
DIN DNS or something like that, so you can port forward to it.
Right, which can be exploited.
Yeah.
And now the tunnel can be directed
Well,
anywhere they want.
You've taken this thing and you said, I want to access it from the internet.
Right.
So that when I'm at X, Y, or Z, that is not wherever the camera is, I can access it. And there comes the problem. And now it's got a known vulnerability. It's got a known exploit to go along with said vulnerability.
Yep.
And it's a hacker's playground at that point.
And in this day and age where every TV is a smart TV, you've got appliances that are smart appliances, webcams, smoke alarms, thermostats, right? There was a casino that just had that where the thermostat got broken into, which is a weird thing to say. But that's the problem, is that it's not the devices themselves. It's that the companies aren't spending enough time securing them. And even after the fact, when people tell them about exploits, they're not necessarily pushing out updates. Even if they do push the updates, all right, I bought this camera.
Yeah.
I'm an IT guy. I know to look for updates, right? But how about the other 99% of the users that bought this?
Yeah.
They don't even think about updates. They just plug it in, it works, and they never touch it again.
Right. They leave the security up to the end user. And your average end user out there doesn't know about security. They wouldn't know how to do an update on this thing if you handed them a laminated playbook that said, here's exactly how to do this. They would still get it wrong. And that's because they're not tech people. They just want a device that works. And when they plug it in and it works, they're happy. And they don't think about it after that.
When you walk into somebody's house and their microwave is flashing 12 o'clock
Yeah.
on the time, like, you know all their devices are out of date.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
it's just not happening. So that is why IoT is such a big problem. And it's even a bigger problem for corporations, right? Because if I'm a corporate entity, I might do company-issued laptops and company-issued phones that I've applied security policies and restrictions to and so on. And then one of my employees one day just says, you know, I want to see what's going on in my office at night when I'm out there. And they bring in one of these cameras and they pop it in their office, right? I don't control that. Nope. I might not even know it's there. And all of a sudden, here's this device that an attacker could remotely get into, seize control over it, and then start leapfrogging through the rest of the network.
They're great pivot points.
They really are.
Because they're just so open. There's so many of them that have these vulnerabilities like this webcam that it just becomes their inroad that the firewall doesn't even know that it's happening. It just, oh, well, yeah, I've got a web server over here and I allow that kind of traffic. Go ahead, rock and roll all day long. And then they get in, and now even if they never got farther than the device itself, if this device was sitting on Don's desk like it is right now, and it was connected to the network, and he was on his computer typing things that are sensitive information, you could get it that way. Maybe you're not exfiltrating data away on like normally a hacker would do that, which is by grabbing the file, FTPing it or whatever through some means out of they're just looking at it and recreating it on their desktop. Right? It doesn't matter how you get the data, as long as you get the data. I've seen security auditors say, I walked up to a window and took a picture of sensitive or confidential information that was laying on a desk.
That counts.
How much easier would it be if I could just log into this little guy, zoom in, get night vision? You're not even there. I'm like panning around the thing, talking to the night maid, and she's freaking out, doesn't know what's going on, thinks it's a ghost in the machine.
The night maid?
Yeah,
Are you studying on like an
whatever.
1800s like farm?
I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah.
What is it? Like services
The
that come
cleaning
in.
crew?
Cleaning crew. There you go. That's what it is.
All right. Well,
Is maid not PC now?
I don't know. Night maid. It's like anyhow. All right. So IoT is a big problem, and
Yeah.
it is a big problem because these companies are not security focused, and when even the big names are not doing a great job, The small names are doing even worse.
Yeah.
All that being said, be sure to check my eBay for a great deal on a camera.
$20, and make sure to let me know when you get it installed and that it's working.
If you need any help configuring it, I can remote in.
That's right.
Knock that right out for you.
Super easy.
All right. Speaking of remote, this is a good segue here to our next question coming at us Twitter way from hashtag Ask Me Anything, which is, what is a rat? And it's rat with only one T. I thought it was the 80s hair metal band, but it is not. So, Daniel, what is a rat?
Can you fire off round and round? Is that too much?
We'd have to license it.
Yeah, we got to license that. But so what is a rat? It's someone who doesn't know when to keep their mouth shut. They go before the judge. No.
Snitches get stitches.
That's right. Snitches get stitches. So what we mean by rat, you'll notice that it's all uppercase, which means it's an abbreviation for remote access Trojan. These are actually really cool things and can kind of be a double-edged sword, but are typically used for malfeasance purposes. So the name implies what it is. Remotes, it's access, and Trojan. So a Trojan, hopefully, if you don't know, it is a piece of software that masquerades as something innocuous, maybe a game or something you need, a utility for your machine. You double click, you install it, and you go, great, I got a cool little utility, or it didn't do anything, must be broken, oh well, and move on. But on the backside, it's actually hooked into your system and gives remote access to a bad actor or a systems administrator, depending on how it's being employed. But typically, like I said, it's through bad actors. So once that thing fires off, it does a multitude of different things. The first and foremost is it tries to find its mothership. It tries to phone home. It says, I'm looking for what's called a command and control server, either C2 or CNC. You might hear these terms. They are synonymous. Once it's able to contact the C2 server, the person at the end of the C2 server now has basically a systems administration tool, a remote systems administration tool built into their target. And I can now perform a multitude of different tasks. I can get a remote shell. I can add and remove documents and programs, do whatever it is I really want to do from a remote location. They are a lot of times they're used to, and this kind of goes back to our IoT devices. You can build a botnet with these things pretty easily. IoT devices are great for botnets because nobody's looking at them at all. And if they get a piece of malware on them, gives me remote access to it, so much the better. And now I can control an army of devices no one's even looking at. Or a device that you might use on a daily basis, but you're not aware that I've got this program running in the background that you thought might have been innocuous or didn't even realize, or it was faked in some way so that you don't see it. You're giving me access to your machine. So this would be great during something like a social engineering attack, where I do a spear phishing campaign. I'm targeting Don. He's the co-founder of ITProTV. I send him an email. It's something he loves, the Whiskey of the Month Club. And all you got to do to keep on, hit this Twitter feed or hit this link and go and install our thing to tell you about the latest whiskey. Don is in hook, line, and sinker. He double clicks this thing. Maybe there is an actual application that runs that lets him see cool whiskeys that he might want to try. But it's also giving me access to his system, and now I can peer in, exfiltrate data, do a myriad of a ton of different stuff. There's a few of them out there which you can play with. I've played with a couple of them. There's a few that I like that I can show you. It's pretty simple. I actually brought one up because I knew this question was coming. So I brought up my terminal. It was a bit to get installed. Let me get it a little larger here. It's called Puppy or a Puppy, however you like to do it. It's a Python implementation of remote access Trojan. Very cool stuff. So I have a Windows 10 machine here, and you'll notice this picture.jpg. And if I double click that, I want to see this picture. What is that? Oh, weird. It didn't work. What's going on there? Well, let me change my network here and get on the correct network so I can actually see this thing. As soon as I get on the network, so right now, that was my remote access Trojan. I created a payload. I spearphished whoever that Windows 10 user was. They thought it was a cool picture. Let me take a look at it. And now I want to see it. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, well, off to my job doing whatever. But it was actually my remote access Trojan, which is actually trying to phone home and beacon to the C2 server right now. All I have to do is fire out the C2 server. So in here I have a puppysh.py or puppy.sh. All I have to do is fire that off. sh dot. I can't type. I'm a horrible typer. .py. Look at that. There we go. Probably help if I put the slash in there. And now that's going to ask me for my credentials. I have secured this so that no random person can go in. The server has started, and you'll notice that one session has already opened. It immediately tried to gain access to the server, and now I'm able to do something like shell. And look at that. I am running a Windows machine on my Linux. Well, that's because it's giving me a remote access shell to that Windows 10 box. And I can do all those standard things. Who am I? I want to see who I'm logged in as. Who am I? And now I see I'm running as this user right here. And from there, I can start my enumeration, exfiltrate data, leave stuff. And these things typically you can push them up into the RAM so that they don't get detected by AV. I actually checked this, and there was a handful of AV systems and anti-malware systems that did not see this as a malicious file. So I slapped that into Trend Micro and saw that. Was like, man, that's a real interesting thing. I've got an out-of-date not Malwarebytes, but Windows Defender on. It doesn't detect it. So good reasons why you should stay on top of your antivirus, anti-malware systems, because once these things are found and signatures are uploaded into the systems like Trend Micro, not Trend Micro, but what's the
VirusTotal?
VirusTotal. Thank you very much. Into VirusTotal, they get those aggregated. They can push those out to all those AV systems so they can find them when they are on your system. You can also do, if you see any kind of weird things happening with your computer, look for stuff like unknown processes that are running. Do things like a netstat-a to see if there's any open communications that you're not familiar with and kind of run them down. Because this is opening a network connection on the system, so that would be one way to discover this. But that's that is right there, a remote access Trojan coupled with a C2 server. I now have basically all the rights this DLauer user has, and I can do whatever I want to at that point.
Yeah, and a lot of this is built around that idea of like a reverse SSH connection where most people filter traffic coming into the network. They don't filter traffic going out. This is an outbound connection, so it goes undetected.
And it's over port 443.
Oh, even more masked. And a lot of times the attacker won't mess with the infected machine. They'll use it as a springboard to attack other machines on the network. And you might see those attacks and tie it back to a local computer, not tying it all the way back to the original attacker. Right. So it is a great way for them to hide their presence. And unfortunately, these are way more common than you'd think. Daniel's suggestion to stay up to date, that is really your number one defense.
That's right. And always do some security auditing of your own system. Even if you're just a home user, make sure that you are pushing your patches, doing your updates on a regular cycle. If you see, hey, there are updates available, you might want to go ahead and push those out. If you have third-party software, do the patching for that as well. These are things that we can do as end users to protect ourselves. Pay for a good quality antivirus, anti-malware system. They're the ones that are going to help you stay out of the weeds and detect things like this. Again, they're not perfect, but it's that layered defense that's going to keep us out of trouble and keep us from being the low-hanging fruit to those bad actors. And when it comes to social engineering, always trust but verify. I don't even trust. Screw that. Verify everything. Don't trust anything. If you get an email from your mom and it has an attachment on it, you better run that sucker through VirusTotal or your AV system before you ever open it. It doesn't matter because they could have been compromised. So even though you trust that person, you can't trust the systems. You have to verify everything. So that would be my advice on that.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, I think that runs us through the list of our questions that we had for the show. So I appreciate you coming into the studio with us and answering those.
Good time.
And yeah, I'm trying to think if I thought maybe one more question was popping up, but that's it. So I do want to remind everybody out there in TV land that if you enjoyed what you heard, a lot of security topics today, we have a ton of security training available in the ITProTV library. You can jump in there and check it out. Remember, if you're an ITProTV subscriber, not only do you get access to all of our content, but you can post questions into our Q&A forum, and we prioritize those to make sure they get answered right here during the show. Definitely check it out. Daniel is our rock star for doing our Cybersecurity Analyst Plus certification, CISA Plus, as well as a number of other pieces of security content that are available on our site. And Pen Test Plus, we talked about earlier, is coming soon, also featuring Mr. Daniel Lowry. So definitely cool stuff to keep your eyes out for, and stay tuned on ITProTV. But that's going to wrap up this episode of Ask Me Anything. If we didn't get to your question here in the show, or if you have other questions you want to ask, Remember, throw them out there on Twitter, hashtag #AskSMeAnything. We monitor that all week long, gather your questions, and answer them right here on the show. Well, I've been your host, Don Pizzette, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.